They said I was too old to learn new systems. Maybe this job wasn't for people who didn't grow up with computers. 3 years later? Well, guess who's training the so-called digital natives? Hi, I'm Linda. I'm 51 years old, and I've been working at Hartwell Insurance here in Ohio for 18 years. I thought I had job security figured out. Boy, was I wrong. Let me tell you how I went from being the old lady who can't keep up to the person everyone calls when their computer won't cooperate. It was a Tuesday morning in March, and I was at my desk early like always, 7:30 a.m. with my coffee, ready to tackle another day of managing client files and keeping our little office running. That's when Jake Morrison walked in. 26 years old, fresh MBA, fancy suits that probably cost more than my car payment. He was our new Operations Efficiency Manager, which basically meant he was there to mess with everything that was working fine. "Good morning, team," he announced to our office of 12 people, most of us who'd been there since before he graduated high school. "Today we're starting Hartwell Insurance's digital transformation." I'm thinking, oh great, here we go again. We'd been through these transformations before. Usually meant new forms and maybe a different phone system. But this was different. Jake wheeled in a projector and started talking about CloudSync Pro, some computer program that was going to handle everything. Client files, scheduling, billing, the works. Everything I'd been doing perfectly fine for years was now going to be done through this thing. "Now, I know change can be scary," Jake said, his eyes landing on me and Donna, the only other woman over 45 in the room. "But this system is so user-friendly. Even my grandmother could figure it out. Even his grandmother. Really nice, Jake." The training Jake gave us was a complete joke. 2 hours. 2 hours to learn a system that was supposed to replace everything we'd been doing for years. He clicked through screens so fast I couldn't even see what he was doing, rattling off instructions like we were supposed to memorize it all instantly. "Any questions?" he asked at the end, clearly expecting us to say no. I raised my hand. "Could you go through that client search thing again? I didn't really catch—" "It's super intuitive, Linda." He cut me off with this patronizing smile. "Just click around and explore. That's how you learn these programs. Trial and error. Trial and error." Easy for him to say when he wasn't the one responsible for Mrs. Patterson's insurance claim not getting lost somewhere in cyberspace. The younger people, Sarah, Mike, Jessica, they seemed to pick it right up, already clicking through screens like they'd been using it forever. Meanwhile, I'm still trying to figure out how to log in without breaking the whole thing. Those first few weeks were hell. What used to take me 10 minutes was now taking an hour. Simple stuff like pulling up a client's file or scheduling an appointment became these massive, frustrating disasters. I was staying late every night, trying to catch up on work I used to breeze through. Tom would find me at the kitchen table, at 10 p.m., practicing on our home computer, trying to memorize the steps Jake had rushed through. "Maybe you should ask for more help," Tom suggested one night while I was struggling with something called data migration protocols. "I tried, I told him. "Jake just keeps saying it's intuitive and I should figure it out myself." The breaking point came 3 weeks later during a team meeting. Jake was going over everyone's productivity metrics. Fancy talk for how fast we could work. "Overall, the transition's been pretty smooth," he said, pulling up some chart on his laptop. "Most people have actually gotten faster, but—" his eyes found mine across the table. "Some of our more experienced staff are still having trouble adapting." Experienced. That was his nice way of saying old. Linda, for instance, is taking 40% longer to do basic tasks than before the upgrade. We might need to think about whether this position is still a good fit. I felt my face burning. Everyone was staring. Some looked sorry for me. Others had that uncomfortable look people get when they're watching someone get humiliated. "I just need more time to learn it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Jake shrugged. "Thing is, Linda, technology moves fast these days. Maybe this kind of work isn't really for people who didn't grow up with computers. Nothing wrong with that. There are plenty of opportunities for people your age in other areas. Other areas. Like what? Walmart greeter? I sat in my car for 20 minutes that night, crying before I could drive home. I went home ready to throw in the towel. Started mentally preparing Tom for the fact that we'd have to tighten our budget, maybe dip into retirement savings while I looked for something else. But Tom surprised me. "You're not a quitter, Lynn," he said after I told him what happened. "Remember when you learned Excel? You cursed at that computer for 3 weeks, but you figured it out. And that smartphone the kids made you get? You said you'd never understand that thing either." He was right. I wasn't always great with technology, but I wasn't hopeless. Besides, Tom added with a grin, "You think that little boy knows more than you? You've been managing offices since before he was potty trained." That's when I got mad. Good and mad. If Jake wanted to see what this old lady could do, I'd show him. Next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. Went to the library. Mrs. Chen, our librarian, was about my age and had always been helpful. I told her what was going on, and her whole face lit up. "Oh, honey, perfect timing," she said. "We just started computer classes for adults. Free, and we meet Tuesday and Thursday nights." So there I was, 48 years old, sitting in a computer class with 12 other people who all felt just as lost as I did. Our teacher was Maria, a retired teacher who started the program after watching her own mother struggle with technology. She was patient, never made you feel stupid for asking the same question twice. "There's no such thing as a dumb question here," Maria would say whenever someone apologized for not getting something. This stuff was designed by 20-year-olds who forgot that not everybody learned computers in kindergarten. We started with basics. How to use a mouse properly, keyboard shortcuts, how to switch between programs without accidentally closing everything. Stuff the young people at work just knew somehow. But Maria didn't stop there. She taught us about different kinds of software, how to fix problems when things went wrong, even some basic computer logic that helped you understand how these programs actually worked. The library classes were great, but I needed specific help with CloudSync Pro. That's when my nephew Danny became my secret weapon. "Aunt Linda, you know you can learn literally anything on YouTube, right?" he said during Sunday dinner when I mentioned my struggles. "YouTube's for watching funny cat videos," I told him. Danny laughed and pulled out his phone. "YouTube's for learning everything. Watch." He typed CloudSync Pro tutorial, and boom, dozens of videos popped up. Step-by-step guides made by people who actually used the program every day. "The trick," Danny explained, "is finding videos made for beginners, not the advanced users. And take notes. Lots of notes." So that's what I did. Every night after dinner, I'd sit at the kitchen table with a notebook and our laptop, watching YouTube videos and writing everything down like I was studying for the most important test of my life. I learned shortcuts that could save me minutes on every task. Found features in CloudSync Pro that Jake never even mentioned. Figured out how to set up the interface so it actually made sense for how I worked. Tom would bring me coffee and peek over my shoulder at my notebook, all filled with my neat handwriting, and little diagrams showing how to get from one screen to another. "You know," he said one night, "you're working harder to learn this thing than most people work at their actual jobs." Yeah, well, I was determined to beat this stupid system. After about 6 weeks of library classes and YouTube marathons, something just clicked. I was moving through CloudSync Pro like I'd been using it forever. Better than that, I was finding ways to use it that actually made my job easier than the old system. I made templates for common client situations that cut my data entry time in half. Found report features that showed us stuff about our business we'd never known before. Even discovered this thing that could catch billing mistakes before they became problems. Best part? I was finishing my daily work faster than I ever had. Jake noticed, but he wasn't about to give me any credit. Looks like Linda's finally catching up to where everyone else was 2 months ago, he announced during one of our meetings. Catching up? I was doing things with that system none of the digital natives had even thought of, but I kept my mouth shut and kept learning. It was a Friday afternoon in July when the whole system went to hell. I was working on a quarterly report when CloudSync Pro just died. Screen went gray, then blue, then completely black. "Is anybody else's computer broken?" Sarah called out. "Mine too," Mike said. Within minutes, our whole office was in chaos mode. Nobody could get into any files. The phones were ringing with clients wanting information, and we couldn't look up anything. Jake was freaking out, calling CloudSync support and getting stuck on hold. The robot voice said wait time was approximately 45 minutes. "This is a disaster," Jake kept muttering, pacing around like a caged animal. "We can't lose a whole afternoon." That's when I spoke up. "I think I know what's wrong," I said. Jake looked at me like I'd just claimed I could fly. "What do you mean?" "I've seen this error before, in one of the YouTube videos. There's steps you can try before calling tech support." Jake hesitated. "You could see the wheels turning. Did he really want help from the old lady who couldn't keep up? But with clients calling and everyone standing around useless, he didn't have much choice." "Okay," he said. "What do you think we should try?" I walked over to his computer and started going through the troubleshooting steps I'd learned. Checked the network settings first, then cleared the system cache. Finally ran a diagnostic that showed the problem, some corrupted file that was messing up the whole program. 15 minutes later, CloudSync Pro was running perfectly. The whole office started cheering and getting back to work. Jake looked like he'd swallowed a bug. "How did you know how to do that?" he asked. "YouTube," I said. Amazing what you can learn when you actually want to learn it. Word got around fast that Linda, the old lady who supposedly couldn't handle technology, had saved everyone's butt when the system crashed. Suddenly, people were coming to me with questions. Sarah couldn't figure out how to make a specific report. I showed her 3 different ways to do it, including one that updated automatically. Mike was struggling with the client communication features. I taught him how to set up automatic reminders and custom templates that made his life way easier. Even Donna, who'd been struggling just as much as me, started asking for help. "How'd you get so good at this thing?" she asked, while I helped her set up a new client file. "I decided I wasn't going to let it beat me," I told her. "And I found better teachers than the ones we got here." I started making my own training guides. Simple. Instructions with screenshots that actually made sense. Wrote them the way I would have wanted someone to explain things when I was struggling. Jake noticed what I was doing, but couldn't complain. Those productivity numbers he loved so much showed our team was now doing better than any other department in the company. September rolls around, and Mr. Peterson, our department head, calls me into his office. I'm nervous as hell. Meetings with the boss usually meant somebody was in trouble, but Mr. Peterson was smiling when I sat down. "Linda, I've been hearing some interesting things about your work," he said. "Jake tells me you've become quite the expert on our new system." Jake told him? That was news to me. Jake had barely talked to me since the day I fixed the crash. Just trying to do my job, I said. "You're doing more than that. I've seen those training materials you made. They're better than anything CloudSync gave us. Clearer, more practical." Mr. Peterson leaned forward. "How would you feel about taking on some new responsibilities? We're thinking about creating a position for technology training across all our departments. Someone who understands the systems and what it's like to actually learn them." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You want me to train people?" Training coordinator. It comes with a raise, obviously, and you'd work with all 4 departments, not just insurance. I said yes before he finished talking. My new job was nothing like I expected. Instead of managing files and schedules, I was now helping 120 employees across the whole company get better with technology. Turns out, A lot of these digital natives weren't nearly as tech-savvy as everyone thought. Sure, they could use Instagram and play games on their phones, but when it came to actually using complex work software, many of them were just as lost as I'd been. The difference was, they were too embarrassed to admit it. They'd rather struggle in silence than ask for help and look stupid. But they felt okay asking me. Maybe because I was old enough to be their mom, or maybe because I'd openly struggled and lived to tell about it. Either way, they started coming to me with questions they wouldn't ask anyone else. "Linda, I hate to bother you, but I can't figure out this Excel thing. Linda, my computer keeps freezing when I try to run reports. Linda, I accidentally deleted something important. Any way to get it back?" I loved every minute of it. Every question was like a puzzle to solve, and I'd gotten pretty good at finding answers. Those YouTube tutorials that saved me became resources I could share. The library classes taught me how to break complicated stuff down into simple steps. Most importantly, I remembered what it felt like to be overwhelmed by technology, so I never made anyone feel stupid for not knowing something. The best part? Jake, the guy who made me feel worthless, now technically worked under my department whenever his team needed tech training. I won't lie. The irony was pretty sweet. First time Jake had to come to one of my training sessions, I could see how uncomfortable he was. Here was the woman he'd written off as too old to learn, now teaching him advanced features of the system he'd claimed was intuitive. But I stayed professional, treated him like any other employee who needed help, with patience and respect, even when he asked questions that showed he didn't understand the system nearly as well as he'd pretended. "Thanks, Linda," he said, after I helped him fix a problem that had been driving him crazy for weeks. I didn't know it could do that. "There's always more to learn," I told him. "That's what keeps it interesting." I think that's when Jake finally got it, that being older doesn't make you worse at learning technology. Sometimes it makes you better at it. 3 years later, I'm still the IT training coordinator, and I love this job more than any job I've ever had. I've trained hundreds of people, created programs that other companies want to buy, and become the person everyone calls when technology seems impossible. But you know what the most important thing I learned was? It wasn't about computers or software, or any of that stuff. I learned that too old to learn is just something people say when they want an excuse to give up. The truth is, being older can actually make you better at learning new things, not worse. When young people learn technology, they often just memorize steps without understanding why. When I learned CloudSync Pro, I wanted to understand how everything connected. That deeper understanding made me way better at solving problems and finding creative solutions. I also figured out that the best way to really master something is to teach it to somebody else. Every time I help a coworker learn a new system, I understand it better myself. Last month, our company won a regional award for digital innovation in small business. Mr. Peterson mentioned our training program specifically in his speech. "Our secret weapon," he said, "is having someone who remembers what it's like to learn this stuff from scratch, and who never makes anyone feel dumb for asking questions." Jake was sitting at my table during dinner. He leaned over and said, "Linda, I owe you an apology. I was a cocky kid who thought I knew everything." "We all got things to learn," I told him. "The trick is staying open to learning them." Jake's actually a decent supervisor now. Still has that MBA confidence, but he listens to people who've been doing the work longer than he's been alive, and when he has tech questions, he's not too proud to ask for help. Look, I'm sharing this story because I know there are other women out there who've been made to feel like they're too old, too slow, or too stuck in their ways to learn new things. That's complete garbage. Being older doesn't make you less capable. It just means you might learn differently than some 22-year-old. You might need more time to practice. You might need someone to explain things twice. You might need to take notes and ask questions. So what? Those aren't weaknesses. That's just how some people learn. And sometimes, the people who have to work harder to learn something end up understanding it way better than the people it came naturally to. If you're dealing with your own Jake, somebody making you feel like you can't keep up, don't let them push you out. Find your YouTube tutorials, take your library classes, ask your nephews for help, and don't be ashamed of being a beginner. Everyone was a beginner once, even the people acting like they were born knowing how to use computers. I'm 51 years old, and I just signed up for an online course in data analytics, not because I have to, but because I want to. Because learning new stuff keeps life interesting. The day you stop learning is the day you start getting old, and I'm not ready for that yet. So if this helped even one person feel more confident about tackling something new, then it was worth telling. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a Python programming tutorial to watch. These young hotshots won't know what hit them.